Hi, welcome to NDE TV. I'm Peggy Robinson. Today's guest is Sandi Crea, and she hasn't had a near-death experience, but I'd like for everybody to hear her story. Hi, Sandi.
Hi, Peggy. Hi, everybody out there. Um, it's going to be hard to tell my story because there's so much to it, but I'll start a little bit with how everything came to be. When I was 39 years old, my husband and I had three daughters who were 21, 21, and 11. And on May 18th, 1991, I gave birth to a very surprise miracle baby who I conceived while on the pill. And it was a it was a blessing that I was so happy to have. People were not necessarily kind at my age. I heard a lot of, oh, you had an oops, you had a mistake. And I would tell them Nick was not a mistake. He was a surprise. People would say, well, what's the difference? And I would tell them, a mistake is something you probably don't want to happen. A surprise is something you didn't know you wanted until you got it.
Mhm.
And he was always that to me. I used to call him my baby from heaven because he was a true miracle. My pregnancy was very complicated. The only time that I ever had any issues, I spent almost the entire 9 months in bed, on bed rest, trying to keep both he and I alive. Due to some really good prayers, I did a novena to Saint Elizabeth, who is the patron saint of expectant mothers, and great doctors. At the time, we lived in the Maryland, but it was the DC area basically, and the doctors were phenomenal. I had an obstetrician that was the best. They ended up calling in a cardiologist because I had developed a condition called VTAC, which is unheard of in pregnant women. They didn't know how to treat it. They didn't know what to do. And medication, bed rest, constant monitoring of both my heart and his growth took over the whole pregnancy. Nick was safely delivered despite all of their fears, naturally, no anesthesia. And the nurse's comment when he was born was, he's so beautiful and he's so big. He was 9 pounds, 21 inches long, and he was just my miracle. So, because we had had so many issues during the pregnancy, and I brought him to term, and he was healthy and beautiful, I lived in a fool's paradise that I never thought anything could ever happen. I was wrong. November 11th, 2009, Nick left this existence at the age of 18 and a half to go to the spirit world. Some of the interesting things were that Nick apparently, his soul knew that he was not going to be here long. When he was young, he was a good sleeper, but he couldn't go to sleep unless he held my hand. He hated to be away from me. He did not want to spend the night at other people's houses because he wanted to be near his mother all the time. So our house became the place where all the boys came to spend the night, and they always spent as many nights as they possibly could. When he was about 9 years old, he started to have panic attacks in school. And I would get a call from the school nurse. They would tell me, Nick needs to talk to you. And he would be crying because he was terrified that something had happened to me while he was at school. A little backstory is his father, my husband, used to travel for his job. So Nick and I were just the two of us a good portion of the time. And he would have these panic attacks, picturing me falling down the steps, breaking my neck. Or he would have panic attacks that I would be in the kitchen preparing food. A knife would slip, I would cut myself, and I'd bleed to death. I mean, he was terrified of this. The school was very good about allowing him to address those fears with me so I could reassure him. But nevertheless, it did cause him a great deal of stress. We did therapy with him, and the therapist was very good. She taught him some biofeedback techniques and things, but she could not put him on anti-anxiety medications because he had severe ADHD and he was already taking a med for that. They did not want to add anything else. For some reason, suddenly he outgrew that. Well, Nick was about 12 years old before he could go to sleep without holding my hand. We were very close. I do believe that in all of our lives, we have been soulmates. And most people think of a soulmate as somebody that you're romantically involved with. It wasn't like that at all. But a soulmate in the true sense of the word is a soul that you have a particularly close bond with, and you tend to reincarnate over and over again in multiple lives. And I have had many past life regressions, almost every one of them. Nick and I were together. A lot of them, we were mother and son, just like we are in this life. And in most of them, Nick passed before me, very tragically. So he got to be about 13 and he got over his anxiety. He was able to sleep without holding mom's hand. And my mom passed away. He loved his mom greatly, and he was affected pretty strongly by her passing. And he started telling me over and over again, Mom, Pop-Pop is going to outlive me. Well, my father was 26 when I was born. So when my mom passed away, she was 71, my dad was 77. And I would tell Nick, honey, it's not going to happen that way. Your Pop-Pop is so much older than you. The odds of you being out of him outliving you are very slim. I said, maybe he might outlive me because 26 years isn't as much, but not you. Nick was adamant. It turns out that he was right, because my father went on to live until he was 1 month shy of his 94th birthday. He passed away in September of 2020. So he actually outlived Nick by 11 years. Nick knew. There were other little things that led me to believe that Nick was aware, his soul. Again, I don't think he consciously knew that where these things were coming from, but he would say things like, Mom, I will always love you more than any other person in the world. And I'd say, sweetheart, that's wonderful. And I love you saying that. But the reality is someday you're going to grow up and you're going to meet a woman that you're in love with. And she will come first in your life. If you're lucky, you will have children and they will come first in your life. And that's how it should be. He said, no, Mom, I will never love anybody as much as I love you. Passing at 18 and a half. Yes, he had girlfriends that he was involved with, but he never married, of course. He had no children. So technically, I probably was the person that he loved the most all of his life. I think that was another indication that he knew. Fast forward to November 11th, 2009. And it's ironic that Nick passed on that day, because he told me most of his teen years, 11 was his lucky number. People don't necessarily think of passing as being a lucky thing, but to the soul, it actually is, because they get to go home again. They are free of their bodies. They get to return to pure spirit. And so if you look at 2009, you can even turn the 2009 into another 11 if you want to, which would make it a triple 11. How much luckier could it have been for him to pass on that particular day?
Yeah.
So Nick passed in a two-car, three fatality accident. He was, I don't want to go into a lot of details, but it was all accidents are bad, but Nick was crushed by the steering column. The entire rear front end of the car ended up in the back seat. The coroner assured me that he felt nothing, that he was dead upon impact. Thank goodness, because I had nightmares worrying that my son was in that car crying for his mom because he was dying. His best friend was also in the car with him and passed away. Unfortunately, his friend was a hemophiliac and he didn't pass instantly. He bled out. Nick did not bleed out. He didn't have any, he had injuries that were intensive, but there was no bleeding. And it took them a very, very long time to get the bodies out of the car. So I've always believed in reincarnation. I've always believed in spirit communication. I've always believed in a lot of the things that I've studied since Nick passed. They made sense to me all my entire life. And unbeknownst to me, before we even had official confirmation from the police department that he was deceased in the accident, I had heard it on the phone from a phone call. The friend of one of his friends that was there when the accident happened, but we didn't have a confirmation from the state police. We had to wait 6 hours for that. But Nick started sending signs immediately. I didn't recognize it at the time, but when the family all accumulated at our house, they turned the TV on to watch the news to see.
You just changed something in your sound. Do you move or?
Sorry.
There you go.
Okay.
Oh, it's still there. It's just a little
What are we looking?
There you go. You're coming back.
Okay. So my son-in-law was turning the TV on to try to see if there was any news about the accident. The TV kept going to a weird setting. And I didn't know anything about TVs. I didn't know anything about what the settings should be on. I mean, all I did was turn the remote on and turn the channel. And finally, after about an hour, my son-in-law said to me, "Mama, why is it on the setting for where you would connect your Xbox?" He said, "When was the last time Nick used this TV to play video games on?" I said, "Nick hadn't used that TV in about 3 years because he used to play his games downstairs. There was a big screen TV, or he played on his computer." So at the time, I didn't realize it, but Nick was switching it to that channel to try to say hello. The signs started coming really fast. We started seeing different things that we associated with Nick almost immediately. At the funeral, or when we had one of the viewings, my husband had bought a brand new suit. And the girl that my son had dated for 2 years in high school looked at my husband and said, "Mr. Crea, the bottom button of your jacket is missing. It had been ripped off." And we were like, "That can't be. It's a brand new suit." And it wasn't that the threads had broken. When my husband took it in to be repaired, they told him, "Who pulled this button off?" We realized that was Nick because, he and his father used to argue about the proper way to button a suit jacket. And my husband always told him, "You always leave the bottom button unbuttoned." And Nick wanted to always button it. So I am positive, there's no doubt in my mind, that Nick was saying, "Dad, I'm taking this bottom button off so you'll know that I'm here." He began sending us in the middle of winter up in Erie, Pennsylvania. And I don't know if anybody is aware of what the climate is in Erie, Pennsylvania. You don't find ladybugs in Erie at that time of the year. They are just not going to be around. And all the flowers from his funeral that we saved, we divided them up into bouquets among his sisters so they could each have some to remember him by. And ladybugs started coming out of the flowers.
What was it?
Ladybugs started coming out of the flowers.
Oh.
And it took me a little while to figure out, why was he using ladybugs? It was nothing that I had ever associated with him. So I looked up the meaning of ladybugs, and ladybugs are considered lucky. Then the light went on in this head, because at Nick's first job, his nickname from his coworkers was Lucky, because he used to wear a necklace that his girlfriend had given him that said Lucky, and it had a shamrock. So there again, he's sending us these ladybugs to show us, hey, I'm here. Nick went on to move articles from one room of the house to the other. They would be, there's an example, was it was Christmas. I was decorated for Christmas already, because I decorated early, and I had a little tiny knit mitten on a Longaberger basket in my foyer. My daughter and my husband were sitting watching TV, and all of a sudden the mitten was on the pass-through between the kitchen and the family room. No one had touched it. They then proceeded to watch it not fly. Well, yes, it didn't fall. It actually flew off of that pass-through onto the middle of the floor. There was no heat source going on. There was no air currents. There was nothing. It just moved and landed right in front of them. Again, I believe that was Nick. I got to see, on Christmas Day, we had dinner, and there was a full body manifestation of Nick in my dining room. He caused the spaghetti that I was cooking to boil over, which I was experienced enough to know not to keep my water from boiling over. He caused a soda to explode in his sister's face, because he loved to play jokes on her. The list is endless. I could see him in the mirror when I would go in the mirror to look in the mirror at nighttime to get ready for bed, and I could see him out of the corner of my eye. I started seeing him in the rear view mirror when I was driving. It was just one thing after another. I was really, really fortunate, because one of the girls he knew in college, her father was friends with a woman who is a psychic medium, and she's awesome. Nobody knows her name. She does nothing for the public. The only way she reads for you is if you know somebody and you get referred to her, and she decides she feels comfortable doing it. And she does it all online. You never meet her. You never talk to her. She doesn't take a penny. And this girl made the comment to me one evening when we were talking. She said, I had a wonderful reading. Nick came through. And I said, I wish I knew somebody to go to, because I'd love to hear from him, because I did believe in spirit communication, as I think I said. And she said, I don't know if she'll read for you, but I'll ask my mom to email her. The woman decided that she would. I was the first person she had ever read for who had lost a child. And she was a little nervous about it, because her own son was a year younger than Nick was at that time. She didn't know how I would take whatever came through. And it turned into, it's over 14 years now, and I still am in communication with her. Nick will still go to her and say, you need to message my mom. I want you to ask her this. I want you to tell her this, whatever. But the readings were phenomenal. She would email me multiple times a day with things that Nick had to say. In his very first reading, he apologized for leaving early. He said that at the time he didn't realize it, but he realized then that his destiny was always to have his life cut short. He said, unlike his friends, he never saw himself marrying. He never saw himself with a career. He never saw himself finishing college. He never saw anything past the immediate future. He also said that he is what they call an elevated soul. And he explained that that meant that he was powerful. He had a lot of energy and he knew how to control it. I started getting messages that lights would be turned on and off. Sure enough, they were. It it was unbelievable, the things that he said through the medium that actually did come true. And people might think, oh, she knew only about him because of the girl that she read for. But she really did not, because the girl didn't talk to her about the same things I would have talked to about. She was my muse. She was my inspiration. She gave me list after list after list of book to read. I've probably read all the greats out there. I've read every George Anderson book. I've read everything by Michael Newton. I've read everything by Dr. Brian Weiss. I've read everything by Robert Schwartz. Anything that had to do with the spiritual world, she told me to read, and I read, and I read, and I read. I was fortunate again in another way, because I don't know if any of the people listening are familiar with, I believe her name is Sandra Goodman, and she wrote a book called Love Never Dies. I had read the book. I was part of a group that they had psychics that did online readings, and you just had to go, you just had to show up. And Sandy Goodman came in one time and announced that there was a group called the Dying to Live Again Foundation. And they would take 6 mothers for a retreat in Sun Valley, Idaho, all expenses paid. And the criteria were, you had to have a child that passed within a certain age, which Nick was, and it had to be within 5 years. You had to write an essay, you had to apply. There were hundreds and hundreds of women who applied for this. They only took 7 women. I was one of the 7 women. I got to go to Sun Valley, Idaho, where I was introduced to Reiki, essential oils. I learned how to pendulum channel to communicate with my son. And I have to say, I was very good at it. I picked it up easily. Some of the women struggled. I did not. And one of my friends did not also. I knew a lady from England who also went to the retreat too. So Sally Baldwin, who ran the foundation and did all the courses that we learned, she has since passed away. But she was an amazing teacher. She was an amazing psychic medium. She gave us all beautiful, beautiful messages from our children, and a lot of tools how to go on with, how to find them, how to communicate with them, how to see them. While I was at that retreat, we were all sitting channeling, and I felt smacked on the top of my head. I turn around and there's no one there. I knew it was my Nick. I knew he was saying, "Yeah, Mom, I'm here." So I had that going for me, as well as Carol, the psychic Carol, who taught me everything. I mean, she answered all my questions about past lives, reincarnation, soul planning, soul groups, everything. I went on to attend every afterlife awareness conference that was offered. I probably, in the 14 years since Nick has been gone, I've probably been to about 7. They don't always have them every year, and sometimes it's in a place I can't get to, but those were extremely, extremely helpful to me. I got to meet some of the great names. I met Dr. Raymond Moody. who is the pioneer of NDEs. I got and do a presentation and do gallery readings. I've met Mark Anthony, who is absolutely a phenomenal psychic medium and a really nice gentleman. While he didn't do readings at any of the events I met him at, a friend of mine and I actually ran into him getting off of the elevator when we were getting ready to get on. And we had met him a few years ago. So we greeted him and reminded him, he remembered us. And he did mini readings for the two of us standing there at the elevator. We called it the elevator reading session. It was a phenomenal, and he was very, very accurate. I've met Dr. Stafford Betty, which he's a big name. There's so many that I can't even remember all of them. But each one of those conferences gave me a chance to be with other mothers. And there were a few fathers, but it was mostly mothers who were in the same situation.
What were these conferences? Excuse me, what were they called?
Well, some of them were run by a woman named Terry Daniels, and they were called the Afterlife Awareness Conferences. I don't know that she's still doing the same thing. My group kind of outgrew what she was teaching after the first few years, and we went to a couple by an organization that goes by AREI, and I meant to look that up to see what it stands for. They are still in business. They still do conferences. Again, I have not gone to one of theirs in quite a while. Then I switched to...
I can't hear you.
Hear you.
Here you go.
Then I switched to Helping Parents Heal. They have had, they're having their third conference this year. I am not going.
Okay, I still can't hear you. I don't know what happened.
I don't know.
There you go. You're back.
Okay.
I think it's moving around or something.
Yeah, and my Wi-Fi is not great
So
here.
Helping Parents Heal?
Yes.
And
I went
when's
to the first one, and it was wonderful. They always are held in the Phoenix, Arizona area, because most of the people that run Helping Parents Heal live in that area. They do a really, really good conference. So I went to the second one a year and a half ago. I decided against going this year, even though I met a lot of wonderful people that I'd like to see again. But my problem is I found that their conferences are so big that I absorb too much energy. And what would happen, the first year that it happened to me, I thought it was because we took an RV trip out to that part of the country, and it took us 6 days to get there. That's what my husband wanted to do. We had an RV. He wanted to use it. We went. And I kept falling asleep in the presentations. I just put it down to fatigue. The second year, it was twice as many parents. And from the minute I walked in the door, all I wanted to do was go to sleep. Again, I fell asleep in almost every single presentation. I realized that I can't physically handle the amount of energy from that many bereaved parents in such a close proximity to me, which is why I may never go to another conference again. I get, it's hard to get much out of it if you're falling asleep. And I couldn't fight it. No matter what I did, I was falling asleep. My friends were nudging me. I'd wake up for a second, but I'd go right back to sleep.
I was that way at Ian's conference.
Really?
Yes.
I get it. Then you understand what I'm saying. But for anybody that's looking for a conference that is geared wonderfully to bereaved parents, Helping Parents Heal, they do a amazing job. They have some of the best presenters. They have some of the best panels. They have it broken down into groups for fathers so that the fathers don't feel alone. They have it now that they have groups for siblings that go along. They really, really do a good job. And I'm not plugging them to plug them, but I'm saying it because it's true. They are really a good organization. Those things really made a difference in what my grief is like. I'm not going to lie. My grief is still extremely heavy, but without the things that I've talked about, I don't know that I would be here today. And if I was here today, I probably wouldn't be sane, because losing Nick took so much from me. I mean, I have beautiful daughters that I love dearly. I have 5 grandchildren that I love with all my heart. And I have 2 great grandchildren, and I have a husband of 49 years. I'm very, very blessed. But Nick was different. There was something about Nick from the very first moment. When I first knew that I was pregnant with him, and I didn't know he was a boy yet until they did the amnio, but I suspected it. I almost imagined that I felt like, and this I don't mean this to sound, it's going to sound way out there, but I kind of felt like Mary must have felt when she found out she was carrying Jesus. Not that Nick was the savior, and not that I was the Virgin Mary by any stretch of the imagination, but I imagined that the bond she had with her son, our Lord, was very close to what I had with my Nick from the first moment.
I have always heard that moms are closest to sons and the dads are closest to the daughters.
I think I think there is some truth to that. I don't think it hurts that I'm Italian, and Italian mothers are really close to their sons. I think and I'm half Jewish also. So I've got the Jewish mother and son thing going. I had the Italian mother and son thing going. But I don't want to negate any of the closeness that I have with my daughters, because we were extremely close too. It was just different. And because he was a surprise baby late in life, I do think that had a lot to do with it also. Nick was special. Nick, every parent's child is perfect in their but at a very early age, Nick displayed traits that you don't normally see in young people. When he was under 3 years old, we were at church, and there was an old woman by herself, and she was walking down the aisle, and he nudged me and he said, "Mommy, why is that lady so sad?" What 2.5, 3-year-old notices the mood of a perfect stranger? When he was 4, we were sitting outside of Baskin and Robin ice cream in our local mall, and there was a homeless lady that came up and asked how expensive the ice cream was. And I told her what we had paid for what we had. And it was obviously she didn't have the money. And he tugged on my hand and he said, "Mommy, can we please give that lady money to buy ice cream?" Again, you don't normally see that in a 4-year-old.
Right.
Nick went on to be, well, there's a couple of things that I can say to describe him. His senior quote, which he wrote at 17, and I don't know if it was an original quote that he came up with or he found it somewhere. I have Googled and Googled and Googled and never come up with where it would have come from. But his senior quote was, "Happiness is not achieved through victory. Happiness is achieved through compassion." And my son was the embodiment of compassion. He's responsible for at least 3 young people today in Erie, Pennsylvania area for being alive, because he intervened in very dangerous behavior that they were doing, because he did not want them to die. His school had exchange students, and the one exchange student from Korea had a very strict host family. All the kids in the school did not follow the dress code when it came to shoes. They wore these suede clogs that were kind of like Birkenstocks, but not as, they were just cheap ones. And this boy was not allowed to have them. His host parents would not let him do it, even though every kid had them. Nick was heartbroken for him. Nick had me taken to the mall, to the shoe store, so that he could buy a pair of these shoes for his friend. He told him, put them in your locker. Don't let your host family see them because they'll take them away. The boy to this day still remembers Nick giving him those shoes. His school used to collect, wore uniforms because it was a private Catholic school. And not every Friday, but often on Fridays, they would have Jeans Day. And Jeans Day, you paid 50 cents. You got to wear jeans instead of your uniform. And the money went to feed the hungry. One of his teachers, who absolutely loved Nick, told me after he passed away that she remembered one of the Jeans Days when the girl came into the classroom to collect the 50 cents from each student. Nick handed the girl a $20 bill and said, keep it. I don't want anything back. At his first job, there was a collection jar for a child who was undergoing cancer treatment. His boss told me afterwards, Nick had never gone into one of his shifts without putting money into that jar. One of his schoolmates described him as a walking random act of kindness. I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional, but it was true. She was bullied by almost everybody in the school. I don't know why. She's a sweet girl. She's pretty, but she was a new student. And you know how kids can be when somebody new comes into the environment. Nick took her under his wing. He would walk her to and from classes because nobody was going to mess with Nick. Nick was 6'2", 200 pounds. And while he wasn't with the in crowd, everybody knew him and everybody loved him. The priest who did his funeral service and did his eulogy said for 18 years, God walked among his people in the skin of Nick Crea. And Father Mike knew Nick very well from school. He loved Nick from the first time Nick was in his classroom. He just loved Nick. And it was apparent in how he spoke about him. We all think our children are special, and each one is. But I will say that Nick humbled me by his kindness, by his unwillingness to bully anyone. In fact, his senior paper that they did for religion, he said, I don't understand bullying. He said, I don't think of it as just not making someone's day better. I mean, not bullying, but why would you not want to make their day better instead of worse? I mean, he just had a spiritual side to him that was far beyond his years, in my opinion. Again, I'm his mom. I love him so much, and I am prejudiced. But everybody that knew him always said that Nick was one of the kindest, most loving, most caring people they had ever met. I know that there were years that we indulged him a lot. He got a lot of things for Christmas. He knew kids that didn't get hardly anything. And he would give away half of his gifts to people that had nothing. The Salvation Army, he could not walk past a red kettle without putting money in. I think that Nick was a very old soul. I think that he came in to do 18 and a half years worth of work. And when it was done, it was his time to go. I wish he would have been able to live longer because I think the world needs more people like that.
Yes.
But there are awful lot of young people that grew up with him as a friend who went on to be really great people. And I like to think that he had a hand in that.
It's beautiful. You know, my first thoughts when you started talking is that I read before that most abortions aren't young girls in trouble. It is the married older women that's already had kids and they have that late life pregnancy. And so he is lucky that, you know, that
Well,
wasn't his fate.
I'm not going to lie. My husband was pretty freaked out because he's 3 years older than I am. And he said, "Do we really need another baby? Would you consider an abortion?" And I looked at him and I said, "You know better than that." And, it wasn't that he really wanted that. It was just he panicked because our life was so settled and the girls were so much older that it starting over again really freaked him out a little bit. Um, he worshipped Nick every day, and I know he misses him every bit as much as I do. He doesn't talk about it because men are different most part, but I know that he misses his his son with all his heart. Um, Nick's real name is Domenico Joseph,
Oh,
and it's a family name. I knew that that would be his name before he was born. It was kind of, I didn't really have much choice in what his name was going to be because it was the family name in my husband's side of the family. However, Domenico is the Italian form of Dominic. And if I'm not mistaken, the meaning behind Dominic is of the Lord. And Nick truly was of the Lord.
beautiful. And it's, you know, he's had more love in 18 and a half years than most of us have had in a lifetime.
Yes. Yes, he has. Nick didn't have an enemy. No one who met him couldn't couldn't love him because he was just that kind of person. He wasn't perfect. He had his flaws. God knows he was lazy. He was a horrible student. He was bright as heck, but he just didn't care. And I wonder often, was it because he really didn't, he knew in his soul that he wasn't going to need that education? So why not enjoy life? Why not make it about make it the best you can and just concentrate on the things that are fun and loving and caring. He could have been a straight A student, but he didn't care. It wasn't important.
And another thought I had is, you know, how he didn't like to be alone, you know, away from you, that when he passed, his friend was with him, you know, they passed
Yes,
together.
yes, his and one of my there I have a couple of consolations with the accident, even though it was horrendous. And obviously I wish it hadn't happened. But my son-in-law at the time told me Nick died doing what he loved best, and that was driving his fast car. He loved his car. He was obsessed with his car. He loved that thing. And he also died with his best friend. And it doesn't get much better than that. It was fast. There was no fear. Nick has told me through psychics that 1 minute he was in his body, the next minute it was like the boosters in Star Trek, zoom out. I do believe that he crossed over instantly. I don't think that there was any hanging around to see what was going on. And I know that he was with us during the funeral. I do know that. But it wasn't like he was earthbound because he was afraid to cross over. It was like, yep, I'm going home now. I could talk for hours about my Nick
Now,
because
I'm going to quote what you said. Am I getting this right? Happiness is not achieved through victory. Happiness is achieved through compassion.
yes.
My granddaughter graduates tomorrow. I'm going to write that in her card.
Wonderful. That I like to say, I don't know where he came up with it. I know a lot of the kids quoted songs, they quoted poets, they quoted this, and I've done Google search for years trying to find where that passage may have came from. All I can assume is maybe it was his own original thought.
I've never heard it, and it
I,
sounds amazing. It's
you
beautiful,
know,
profound.
it really did embody who Nick was. Um, Again, 17-year-old boys are not known for deep thoughts. They're known for video games, cars, girls, those kind of things, hanging with your buddies. And he did all those things, don't get me wrong. But there was a side to Nick that that people just, it was just different. It was just different. All of his friends were good kids. There was never a kid that he was friends with that we were like, Nick, we don't want you being friends with that person. But I don't know that any of them had that deep insight to what was important. Again, I always go back to at 4 years old, he was upset because a woman couldn't afford to buy ice cream and we could. I wouldn't have thought of that at 4 years old. And I consider myself a compassionate person, but I would never, ever have thought to ask my mom to give somebody money for something like that.
It sounds like he was a
I,
little bit psychic to pick up on other people's emotions, you know. Why is she
I
so
think,
sad and she doesn't have ice cream money?
I
And
think he was, I never thought about it that way, but as you say that, I think he was. I also think he was probably an empath to a great degree because he could feel other people's emotions so deeply.
yeah, maybe that's a better
And
word than psychic then.
yeah, I think he probably saw some things or felt things that might have been a little psychic here and there, but I really do think with his spirit, he was an empath. What keeps me going is that I try to live like Nick lived. When I'm out and I see somebody that appears to be homeless and they're asking for money, I never stop to say, they're going to use this for drugs. They're going to use it for alcohol. I give what I can just because I know that's what Nick would have done. When I'm in a tough situation where I need to choose myself or someone else, I say, what would Nick do?
It's so funny because people say, what would Jesus do? And you're like, that's cute.
And obviously, I already know what Jesus would do because we know what he was like. But Jesus is removed in a sense because I wasn't Jesus's mother,
Right.
but I was Nick's mom and I saw it firsthand. So it's much easier for me to try to make him proud by emulating his spirit of generosity.
And what
People
a
always,
beautiful way of keeping him alive is he would
it,
do this if he was here.
he would do this for him. That's why, two things. People always, when they talk to me about Nick, they always say, you did such a good job raising him. And I tell them, I don't think I can take any credit for it. I mean, I believe I was a good mother, but I believe Nick was born to be the person he was. I don't think I created that. I think that was just who he was. He was always happy. He was always smiling. I mean, as a baby, everybody wanted to hold him. Strangers would come up and ask, oh my God, we've never seen such a happy baby. When he was baptized, the priest, as he's pouring the water over his head, Nick is laughing. He was just so happy. And Father Kemp said to us, I've never had a baby that laughed and Nick just loved everything.
Oh.
He wanted to embrace everything that was good in the world, and he loved people. He really did. He had such a huge heart. Again, everybody's child is special, but and while I say Nick was not perfect, I always say with no hesitation, he may not have been a perfect person, but he was the perfect son for me because I couldn't have loved any other boy as much as I loved him.
Lucky boy to be
I
so
was a
loved.
lucky mom.
Yeah.
I was really blessed. He was a true gift from God. And when I used to say he was a baby from heaven, I still think of him as my baby from heaven.
Beautiful. Thank you, Sandi.
Would you like to see a picture of him?
Yes.
I don't know how well you'll be able to see it. I'll cover my face.
Oh, hi, Nick.
That was
Gorgeous.
it's his senior pictures. All of his proofs are in here. The school he went to every year, the photographer they used would pick a girl and boy from the junior class to be their ambassadors and try to get the students to go to their studio rather than to another one. And the girl he was dating in high school, her mother worked for that um, photographer. So obviously her daughter was the student ambassador for the girls. And she said to Nick, "You're going to be the student ambassador for the boys." So they got these special bound. I mean, there's hundreds of pictures in here. They're just beautiful. And, instead of the little, you know, binder ones that most kids get, these are actual photos. They don't even have the watermark on them. So I could cut them out and use them anytime I want to. I don't because the book is precious. But yeah, that was one of his senior
If you want to
pictures.
take a picture of that and send to me, I can put it in the description.
Okay, I'll see how well. Sometimes pictures of pictures don't come out real well, but I will
Okay.
do the best I can.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So
Well, thank
anyway,
you,
Peggy,
Sandi. It's a beautiful story. You did really well. I know you've never done this before, and you did great.
well, I'm surprised that I got through it without crying. Because I do get emotional. It is Nick's. He would be 33 today, and today is a little bit of an emotional day, but it's also a happy emotion too. I wish he had made it to 33, but I truly believe that our time, we know we're going when our time is there. We can't avoid it. It's how we plan it. Not everybody believes in soul planning, but I do. And that gives me a little comfort that Nick went when he was meant to.
Well, I invite everyone to type in the comments, "Happy birthday, Nick."
Thank you. Thank you, Peggy. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of your YouTube. I hope when you edit it, it comes out just as good as
Oh,
you
I don't
want.
edit anything. We'll just take off our chit chat before I introduce this. That's it. And I'd like to tell the audience that I just saw you on Facebook last night. Like, I don't remember seeing you on my Facebook before. Maybe you're a new friend. I don't know. But the first thing I saw was you posted something about your son and going to be his birthday and that he had passed away and he's 18 and a half. And something just said in my heart, tell her to come on. Like, I don't care. You'd have NDE. I didn't know the whole story about any of it. It's just like, oh, this mother, oh, this Nick. We got to get his story out there. So
Well,
glad
I
we did.
appreciate that. The reason you hadn't seen me before, I've been on Facebook for 16, almost 17 years now. I went on when Nick joined Facebook, I joined Facebook. He had originally been on MySpace, and I joined MySpace when he was on MySpace. And then when he went to Facebook, because MySpace wasn't cool anymore, I joined Facebook. But that's a new group that I joined. I have never been in that group before. So you wouldn't have, unless you were in other groups that I was in, you wouldn't have seen me.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I'll get this sent out to you later today.
Okay. And I'll take that picture and I'll email it to you.
Okay. All right.
Thank you, Peggy. You
Thank
have a
you.
great day and have a wonderful graduation for your granddaughter tomorrow.
Thank you.